There's an unwritten rule in every coming-of-age story. Opposites always find each other. Tae-soo is the kind of student who tops every exam without breaking a sweat. Runa is the girl who seems to collect detentions the way others collect trophies. Two people who, by all logic, should never have crossed paths. But somewhere between impromptu study sessions and shared afternoons, the top student with the cold exterior quietly lost his heart. Here's how it all happened. It started with an unexpected disruption in Tae-soo's life. That summer, he transferred from a school in Seoul to a small rural high school near his grandmother's house so he could be closer to his younger brother, Hail, who had been injured. When he went to enroll, the teacher noticed he had already switched schools twice and assumed he must be a troublemaker. Tae-soo quickly set the record straight. He was a serious student. He had been in Seoul because his aunt wanted him to aim for a top university there. The teacher told him not to worry and sent him to pick up his uniform. On the way to get it, Tae-soo wandered into the school library and found himself face to face with Una. There was a moment, a brief but oddly familiar silence between them. Tae-soo shook it off and walked away without looking back. When he returned to the office, the teacher was standing there staring at his academic records in quiet disbelief. With grades like his, the teacher said, medical school was well within reach. After finishing enrollment, Tae-soo stepped outside and was suddenly hit with dizziness and ringing in his ears. Una noticed and started to move toward him, then hesitated, deciding she probably couldn't make it in time anyway. Once he steadied himself, he headed home with his grandfather. While unpacking, he came across a keepsake that had belonged to his father. And just like that, the memory of the day his father passed away in the hospital came rushing back. The next morning, Tae-soo arrived at school early, looking for a quiet place to study. Una showed up shortly after and led him to the library, happy to have company. She was cheerful and chatty, eager to show him around and tell him everything about the school. Tae-soo found her energy a little overwhelming. He kept his distance, pulled out his books, and tried to signal that he wasn't interested in conversation. Una didn't quite pick up on it. She kept glancing over at him, pointing out how quickly he had settled into study mode, and eventually started sharing her own story. She explained that she spent most of her time looking after her father, which had made it hard to focus on school. But recently, she had started thinking seriously about going to university. Old habits were hard to break though, and she worried she might be a distraction. Tae-soo was not particularly concerned with her situation. He kept his eyes on his books, but then Una kept dropping things, creating a steady stream of noise that made concentration nearly impossible. By the time they both stopped for lunch, he had barely gotten through a chapter. He reached into his bag for a carton of milk, but it had gone bad in the heat. Without hesitation, Una offered him some of the instant noodles she had made extra of. While they waited for the noodles to cook, she handed him a school uniform, one for him and one for his brother Heel. To prove how good the quality was, she casually lifted her skirt to show him the fabric, which left Tae-soo flustered beyond words. When the food was ready, Una added some salted kimchi that his grandmother had given her, and that's when she explained the connection between them. Years ago, through a school exchange event, she had given Heel a pair of sneakers. Ever since, his grandmother had asked her to help pick out birthday gifts for the boy. After school, Una keeps talking non-stop, giving Tae-soo a massive headache. He seriously wonders if he should even show up to class the next day. Since she rides her bike, he walks home alone. On his way, he remembers his family walking down this exact same road. Back then, his little brother was excitedly chasing fireflies, while his parents had their arms around Tae-soo, enjoying the cool evening breeze. Now, the scenery is exactly the same, but his family is gone. Everything is just a memory. Right as he gets lost in his thoughts, Una zooms past on her bike. She rings her bell loudly, snapping him right back to reality. When he gets home, seeing his brother's baseball jacket makes Tae-soo think of Una. Even though he boldly claimed he was done with school, he is the very first one to arrive the next morning. She teases him, bringing up what he said the day before. He quickly makes up an excuse about needing to study. Soon after, he asks her how long she has known Heel. She explains that she moved to the area 5 years ago. She also reveals that she actually met Tae-soo that same summer when he came to visit his grandmother's house. At that moment, he finally understands why she has been so friendly to him. From then on, he starts to genuinely accept her kindness. After cooling down, the two of them sit together to study. Because the weather is so hot, Tae-soo is completely drenched in sweat. Seeing this, Ona hands him her scarf to wipe his face. However, when he wraps it around his neck, he looks a little goofy. This makes her burst into laughter. A moment later, she compliments him, saying the scarf actually suits him perfectly. He usually takes the bus, but this time after school, Tae-soo purposely brings his bike. He plans to ride home with Ona. Surprisingly, she decides to take the bus instead. After getting off, she tries to run and beat him home, but but she just cannot outrun him. To make things funnier, he purposely rides his bike back and forth in front of her multiple times. He hopes she will ask him for a ride, but she stubbornly stays quiet. From that moment, she secretly snaps a picture of his back. Since that day, the two of them grow much closer. The next afternoon, her bike gets a flat tire, so he gives her a ride home. To thank him, she buys him ice cream. In the following days, they study together and watch the sunset after class. As they spend more time together, subtle romantic feelings start to bloom between the two teenagers. Una's father runs a guest house, so her home is always busy. That night, he prepares a bowl of mixed rice for her. He then tells her to live a good life and always do what she loves. In reality, her father is struggling with a mental illness. When his mind is clear, he remains very optimistic. The next day, it rains, and his condition worsens again. She gets his medicine and tells him to wait for her, promising to be right back. Afraid that her dad might overthink and do something drastic, she rushes off on her bike, not even caring when one of her sandals falls off. It turns out she has a study date with Tae-soo at the library. Because of her dad's condition, she simply hands Tae-soo the key and leaves. When she gets back home, her father is not sitting on the porch. Panicking, she frantically searches for him. She only breathes a sigh of relief when she finally sees him slowly walking out of the bathroom. At the library, Tae-soo arrives early. He even buys milk for Ana before they start studying. A moment later, she shows up. However, her mind is completely focused on her dad, making it impossible for her to concentrate. Worried that she is distracting him, she ends her study session early and heads home, thinking that something bad has happened to her. He packs up and leaves right in the middle of studying. He plans to go check on her at her house, but his grandmother stops him on the way. She tells him to come inside and hang out with his friends. Left with no other choice, he reluctantly steps inside the house. The next morning at school, Tae-soo heard her coming before he even saw her. He had already memorized the rhythm of her footsteps. While opening a door, Una noticed his bag was stuffed with name tags, the kind of personalized labels that girls in Seoul were known to give to guys they liked. She teased him that he must have a lot of admirers. He said he genuinely had no idea how they got in there. Remembering her odd mood the day before, he asked her what had actually happened. That's when she opened up. Her father had been battling depression for years. After her parents divorced, he quit his job. He had come to this island on a trip one day, fallen in love with the place, and the two of them had moved there 5 years ago. There had been a period when he hurt himself, and ever since then, she couldn't be apart from him without anxiety taking over. Recently things had improved. He found a new job and even started dating someone. His spirits had lifted, and for the first time, Una felt like she could start thinking about her own future. That's what brought on the idea of applying to university. That evening, they sat outside and let the breeze wash over them. Una knew Tae-soo would go back to Seoul for university. She liked English and art and believed she would eventually find work that fit who she was. She showed him some drawings she had made and talked about her plans with quiet determination. Tae-soo shared something of his own. He had once wanted to become a doctor to give his parents an easier life, but now he just wanted to graduate and find work quickly so he could change his circumstances. He wished her well, and he meant it. Summer was ending, the other students would be returning soon, and Una knew the private stretch of time they had shared was almost over, so she told him how she felt. Tae-soo stood there, caught off guard, not knowing what to say. That evening, at an intersection on the way home, they turned in opposite directions. Their parallel paths slowly diverged. When the new school year began, Tae-soo threw himself into his studies. Every time he noticed Una's name carved into the desk, he felt something stir in him. She, for her part, kept watching him from a distance. Months passed quickly. Heel's leg had healed well. Then one day, on the commute home, the ringing in Tae-soo's ears came back. Worried about his health, he decided to make a trip to Seoul. He ended up on the same train as Ina. When she heard he had taken the day off to attend a university information session, she lied and said she was going to one too. She had cut class just to follow him. The time apart had made it feel like it had been years since they last saw each other. Tae-soo assumed she was just tagging along for a day out. Since he had something important to take care of, he couldn't keep her company. But before they parted, he told her not to get lost in the subway. Una then tried to meet up with her father's girlfriend, hoping to see what kind of person she was. But when she arrived, she saw a man entering the woman's home. Furious, she confronted her. "If you're dating my father, why are you meeting another man?" The woman could only explain helplessly that she had never actually been in a relationship with her father. It was her father who had no interest in being with anyone, including her. Feeling deceived, Una stormed off before the woman could finish. At the same time, Tae-soo was at a hospital getting a checkup. The ringing and the hearing issues had been happening more frequently. The doctor found nothing wrong with his eardrums and attributed the symptoms to exam stress. Tae-soo explained that the ringing had actually started after a car accident. His parents had taken Heel out to buy new shoes after his first day of elementary school. On the way, they were in a crash. His parents died at the scene. Heel suffered serious injuries to his leg, and Tae-soo had been living with that ringing ever since. After leaving the hospital, he tracked down Una's location. She was at a subway station, crying, and told him over the phone that this was the first time she had ever tried to venture out on her own. She had thought that coming with him would make it easier. She had not expected him to leave her behind. The moment he heard where she was, he ran. When he finally reached her, they stood side by side at a window overlooking the Han River, watching it flow past in the fading light. The distance and the unspoken tension between them seemed to dissolve in that moment. On the way back, Una told him he had been acting like he was avoiding her ever since school started. Tae-soo gently put his hand over her mouth, catching her off guard. Then, without another word, he reached down and took her hand. Both their hearts were racing. Una, trying to hold herself together, quietly promised that she would stop crying so easily from now on. Time kept moving. Before they knew it, the day of their university entrance exams arrived. Their teacher drove them both to the testing site, reminding them to eat properly, sleep well, and go in with clear heads. Before Una went home that evening, she texted Tae-soo suggesting they meet at 6 the next morning for a walk. Their teacher then dropped Tae-soo off, where his grandparents and brother were already waiting outside. They thanked the teacher for everything he had done. On his way out, the teacher borrowed his grandfather's watch and slipped it onto Tae-soo's wrist for the next day. That night, his grandmother packed food for him to take to the exam, and across town, Una's father cooked up a pot of porridge and packed cookies for her. They met early the next morning as planned. Una confided that she had applied to a school near Tae-soo's university in Seoul, hoping they could be in the same city and avoid a long-distance relationship. He told her to focus on the exam first, and that wherever they ended up, their hearts would stay connected. Then he pulled out his own name tag and pressed it into her hand as a good luck charm. After the exams ended, they headed to the beach to decompress. Then, Una decided she wanted to go to Seoul and see the Han River for herself. Tae-soo barely had any money on him. He checked every pocket and came up with just 7,000 won. Una dipped into her own pocket money without a second thought and pulled him toward the train. On board, she asked why he chose the slowest route. He admitted that the longer the ride, the more time he got to spend with her. S'more. She beamed. They arrived in Seoul after dark, stomachs growling, and found a small place to eat, 2 bowls of noodles. Tae-soo had been thinking they could just stand at the station and look out at the water. Una had other ideas. If they had come all this way, they were going to the riverbank, and so they did. He wrapped his scarf around her when she started to shiver. Standing by the river, she talked about a new dream she had been turning over in her mind, to live independently, on her own terms. Once her father was truly well, Tae-soo's dream was simpler. He didn't want to live alone. Ona told him university life would change that. They got so wrapped up in conversation that Tae-soo suddenly realized they had missed their train. They ran for the last bus of the night. That morning at the stop, Una had asked what would happen to them if they ended up at different schools. Tae-soo reassured her they could text anytime, share the small things every day. Distance didn't have to mean drift. They leaned against each other and exchanged contact information, setting aside every worry about the future to simply be together in that moment. That night, Una quietly brought Tae-soo back to her room. The closeness between them had been building all summer, and neither of them wanted to hold back anymore. Tae-soo kissed her, and she let him. He fumbled with the buttons on her shirt, nervous in a way he hadn't expected. Things were just starting to escalate when her father's voice called out from down the hall. Tae-soo dove under the bed. Ina told her father she was already asleep. He believed her and walked away. But the awkward interruption didn't cool things down for long. After he left, the two of them spent the rest of the night together, soft and unhurried. When morning came, the way they looked at each other had shifted. Something between them had changed, quietly and permanently. Their relationship didn't hurt their grades, which was something of a miracle. Tae-soo started sneaking over to her place at night. As Christmas approached, Una spent a whole evening decorating her room so they could have something special to remember. But all the time she spent behind a closed door was starting to raise eyebrows in the house. The next day was the deadline to submit university applications. Una was so nervous she couldn't bring herself to hit the button. She paced circles around the room, silently pleading with Santa Claus for good news. That night, she snuck out a bottle of fermented grape juice and nearly got caught by her older brother. She smoothed things over by pouring him a glass of water and handing him a cookie, then slipped off to her room with the bottle. She and Tae-soo rang in Christmas together, quietly. They sipped the homemade drink, got a little dizzy, and slipped outside to breathe the cold cold night air. They spun in slow circles, then lay flat on the ground and watched big snowflakes drift down from the sky. After the new year, some of the older villagers called the teacher in, anxious for news about their grandchildren's exam results. But results weren't due until late February, so there was nothing to do but wait. While the town waited, Tae-soo took Una out to the sea and told her he had been accepted to a mechanical engineering program at a university in Korea. Before the semester started, he planned to work as a tutor at a study center run by a friend's father. To earn money for tuition, Una would stay behind and wait for her own results. She was holding on to hope that at least one of the 3 schools she applied to would be in Seoul, so she could be near him. On the day Tae-soo left for Seoul, Una bought a train ticket and insisted on seeing him off. He didn't have the heart to make her go back alone, but she had made up her mind to be with him for as long as she could. Just before the train departed, he took her phone and logged into his music account. From now on, they would share the same account. When he was listening to something, the status would show. She could open it and listen at the same time. Even apart, they would be occupying the same song. They held each other before he had to go, and then, just as they pulled apart, her phone lit up with a notification. She had been accepted, but the school wasn't in Seoul. It was a considerable distance from his. He told her not to worry about that right now. He pulled her into a hug, smiling, and told her he was proud of her. After saying goodbye, Tae-soo moved into a dormitory. He carefully unpacked his keepsakes and tucked them away. When his roommate arrived with his whole family in tow, something in Tae-soo ached quietly. He stepped out. He went to visit his parents' graves and told them to rest easy. He would look after Heel. He would bring him up to the city when he was older. He bowed there in the cold and walked away in tears. Una started her semester too. On her first day, she found friends who shared her interests. Tae-soo was settling into his new campus. When they had free time, they would call each other and trade small stories from their days. The distance didn't seem to affect them at first, but not long after, one of Una's close friends started taking more and more leave from school. Una herself was beginning to feel lost. Her major didn't excite her. The days felt heavy and directionless. She wanted to talk to Tae-soo about how difficult things had become, but he was spending almost all of his free time tutoring. Their calls grew less frequent. She kept her low spirits to herself, not sure where else to turn. She took a bus home to see her father, hoping the visit would clear her head. Instead, he showed up at the station with his girlfriend in tow, and the disappointment hit her hard. That same evening, Tae-soo found her message and quickly snapped a few photos to send her. A few days later, when he finally had a window of free time, she came straight to him. He ran to meet her and held her for a long moment. Being with him pushed the restlessness back for a while. She tried to just enjoy it, but after that visit, Una didn't return to school. She wandered around the village instead. Her older brother spotted her and immediately knew what it meant. He told her to take a leave of absence and try something real. He also brought up what was clearly weighing on her. Staying close to her father had kept her tethered. He thought she should consider moving out on her own. If he were in her position, he said he would have done it a long time ago. Then, almost casually, he dropped bigger piece of near piece. Their father was planning to get married. When Una got home, the girlfriend's family was already there. Her discomfort was immediate and visible. She confronted the woman directly. She had seen her with another man. How could she marry her father while carrying on with someone else? The woman assured her she would cut all ties before the wedding, and that Una's father had given her time to do that. Una couldn't accept that logic. Her brother heard the argument and pulled her aside. He said she was past the age of throwing fits over her father wanting to remarry. He handed her a bouquet of flowers and told her to go apologize. Not wanting to put her father in an impossible position, Una delivered the flowers. It was her way of reluctantly accepting the situation. Once the tension settled, she texted Tae-soo and told him everything she had been holding in. She had been stuck in a fog for too long. She couldn't see where she was going. Knowing she was in Seoul, Tae-soo immediately headed out to find her. When she saw the train pulling into the station, she knew he was almost there. And in that moment, something in her quietly resolved. The uncertainty was going to end. Starting now, she decided to take a break from school and try working first. Her brother suggested applying for an internship over summer. She'd have access to a dormitory room. Una lit up. She found Tae-soo and told him the plan. He backed her fully, said she was talented, that her hands and her art would make her irresistible to any company looking for someone with her skills. She was excited in a way she hadn't been in a long time. If she got the position, living independently wouldn't be a distant dream anymore. But they also knew it would mean less time together. They settled on Friday date nights, carved out and protected. He walked her to the bus stop that evening, and they kissed goodbye the way people do when they're not ready to let go. The following day, Ina landed an internship at a hotel. That evening, Songchan was was waiting outside when she finished her shift, wanting to tell her about a free dormitory spot. She was too exhausted to care. All she could think about was her bed. Then she remembered it was date night. She got up, did her makeup, and went out to meet Tae-soo. He arrived at the house that evening, only for So-hee, the landlord's wife, to appear at the door while handing over a delivery. When Tae-soo opened the door instead of Ona, So-hee started asking questions. How long had they been hiding this relationship? Tae-soo, a little flustered, confessed they had been dating since their final year of high school. He promised they would be more transparent going forward. So-hee was understanding and agreed to keep quiet. The couple ended up having to move their date to the lakeside. Ina opened up about the woman she had run into earlier, who turned out to be her father's fiancée. She wasn't opposed to him finding happiness again, but she didn't know enough about So-hee to feel at ease. The woman had claimed to be from Hawaii, yet spoke flawless Korean, which struck her as odd. More than that, now that her father had someone, Una felt it was time to move out and make space for his new life. Tae-soo listened and pulled her close. Back at school, an upperclassman told Tae-soo he had serious potential in an AI research project and invited him to join the team over summer. It was the kind of opportunity he had always wanted, but he hesitated, worried about the time it would take away from Una. Around the same time, Una called to set up a date. She suggested Wednesday, but he had tutoring. They landed on Saturday morning. Then Songchan called to say he had arranged for Una to meet a senior contact who needed an months. In turn, the senior wanted to schedule the first meeting for Saturday morning too. When Una realized the conflict, she tried to renegotiate but found the woman busy with a client. She let it go. On his end, a student's parents had also asked Tae-soo to cover a Saturday morning session before exams. He agreed. When the parents then asked him to stay through the afternoon as well, he turned them down because of Una. Then her text came in saying she had to work at the hotel Saturday. After all, he accepted the afternoon slot. On the way home, Heel called to say their grandmother's leg was giving her pain and she needed surgery, but she refused to go through with it because she was worried the cost would drain the money set aside for Tae-soo's tuition. Tae-soo's chest tightened. Back in his dorm, he found a text from Una, apologizing for canceling their plans at the last minute. In the days that followed, with exams bearing down on him, he barely slept. He was nodding off during tutoring sessions. The moment the exams wrapped up, he went straight to the hotel where she worked. She only had 30 minutes. He said that was enough. He had something he needed to tell her. While he was on his way, Una had sketched a welcome card design for a VIP room at the hotel, and her colleagues had gathered around, genuinely impressed. Remembering she was supposed to meet Tae-soo, she asked to step out for half an hour, but hotel staff weren't allowed to go outside in uniform, so she could only talk to him by phone. They were trying to make plans to see each other back home when Songchan appeared out of nowhere. Tae-soo had to pretend to be a stranger, asking for directions, then left with his words still unspoken. Una couldn't let him walk away like that. Ignoring Songchan's protests, she ran after him. She didn't know what he had been trying to say, but she told him she believed in whatever choice he made. She trusted him to figure out the right answer. Then, at exactly the 30-minute mark, she turned around and went back to work. On his way back, Tae-soo passed his grandmother's home and saw her struggling to cart supplies on her bad leg. He was about to go help when his grandfather appeared and took over. Watching them, Tae-soo felt his heart break open. That night, sitting alone in his school, he decided to turn down the research lab offer. The lab had been his dream, but right now, all that mattered was earning money for his grandparents. He took one last look around the room and walked away from it. Meanwhile, Una decided it was time to move out of her father's place and into a dormitory. Her father was a little sad but didn't fight it. The next morning, he made her a pot of porridge as a send-off. He could see she had grown up. He told her to live fully and do what she loved. She told him to do the same, because when he was healthy, she could actually think about her own future. After breakfast, she packed up and moved into the dorm. Looking around the room she had long dreamed of having, she felt genuinely happy. She placed a photo of herself and her father, along with Tae-soo's name tag, carefully inside a box. That same day was the start of Tae-soo's summer break. He took the bus home, full of anticipation, already thinking about seeing Una. Once back, he encouraged his grandfather to convince their grandmother to go to the hospital, but the cost was the obstacle. His grandfather only hoped the firewood wouldn't get wet and that they could quietly save enough to care for Heel someday. To help ease some of that worry, Tae-soo went to the lumberyard that afternoon and asked the older brother there for materials to cover the stockpile. The brother saw right through it. The thing worrying their grandfather wasn't the wood, it was time. He was afraid of something happening to him while Tae-soo was away doing his military service, leaving Heel alone. While he was on his way, Tae-soo hadn't heard from Una, so he called. He was counting down the hours until he could see see her. Instead, she told him she had already moved into the dorm. He asked if she could find time to meet before he had to go back to Seoul the next day for work. What she said next hit like cold water. She told him to stop trying to force their schedules to align. She had just moved in, and she wanted some time to herself. Tae-soo took it as best he could. He told her to do whatever she needed to do, but the moment the call ended, he broke down. To him, what she had said felt like a goodbye. Una wasn't doing any better. Even as her work was going well, the guilt of what she had said was eating at her. That afternoon, she went to the shore alone and cried until she had nothing left. The first love they had built so carefully, with all its promises still unfinished, ended there. In December that year, Tae-soo said goodbye to his grandparents and left to begin his military service. Even with his bad leg, heel walked him part of the way. Faced with the weight of everything life had handed him, Tae-soo let the unfinished relationship go. Without Una, the road ahead looked uncertain, but he was still curious about where it would lead. So he began to think about what came next. After his discharge, he became a software developer. On the anniversary of his parents' passing, he visited their graves and told them he had found something resembling stable work. But the ache from that first love had never fully faded. In September 2025, he started a new job as a train conductor. His shifts ended at dawn, and he would meet up with friends for breakfast, then bike and walk the rest of the way home, rather than pay for a bus. He had gotten used to living lean. One morning, he arrived home to find his best friend already parked at his door, asking for ramyeon, the price of being a decent person. To get rid of him, Tae-soo turned on every noisy appliance in the apartment until the guy gave up and left. Alone at last, he put on his favorite song and cracked open a beer. Then the music stopped. He checked his account and found that someone else had logged in. It was Ina. After all this time, she had used the shared account to let him know she was still out there. She had recently left the hotel job and moved on to work at a small homestay. After her manager walked her through the rules, she was shown to the staff room. Knowing Yuna didn't have a place to stay yet, the manager offered to show her a rental nearby. Yuna politely declined. She borrowed a bicycle and rode around to explore the neighborhood. There was a bakery close by, a coffee shop just a few steps down, a flower stall around the corner, and a bus stop not far off. And in the distance, the Han River. The whole area brought something back, a feeling she recognized from a long time ago. After her rounds, she visited an old friend, a woman she thought of as a sister. They caught up over a long meal. The friend asked if she had a place sorted. She could stay with her if not. Una said she planned to stay in the staff room for convenience. Then the friend's boyfriend stumbled home drunk, and the friend quickly steered him away before he could say anything embarrassing. Una ate, said her goodbyes, and took the train back to the homestay. That evening, as passengers stepped off the train, Una and Tae-soo came within seconds of seeing each other. But the doors closed, the train moved on, and they missed each other again. Back at the homestay, Una decided she would stay in the staff room after all. She set a photo of her father on the table, studied his face for a moment, then told him quietly about what she was planning to do next. On his end, Tae-soo was working with music playing when a call from an old colleague interrupted him. When the music cut off abruptly, his mind went straight to Una. The next morning, her first job was picking up bread for the homestay. On the way back, she stopped to buy herself a bouquet of flowers, a small way of encouraging herself before settling in to clean. Once done, she headed to the train station to go home. By chance, that particular train was being operated by Tae-soo. When she stepped onto the platform, she heard his voice. She took off running. At the same moment, he spotted her through a security camera on the platform, and what he felt almost undid him. He pressed close to the screen as his eyes went red. She ran as fast as she could, searching, but his departure time had come. The train left. They missed each other again, brushing past each other without ever touching. After his shift, he went back to the old station hoping she might still be around, but by then, she was waiting at a different platform across the city. A senior colleague called her to say that Song-chan had come to Seoul looking for her. She turned around to find him already standing right there. He didn't ease into it. He told her she needed to come back home. She refused and tried to walk away. He grabbed her arm. Tae-soo happened to see the whole thing from a distance and assumed she was in trouble. He climbed off the train and ran toward her. Just as he was running to find her, she was running too. Their eyes met across the platform. For a moment, it felt like fate, but Song-chan was right behind her, and she could only hold Tae-soo's gaze for 2 seconds before she kept moving. She ran far enough to clear her head, then decided she needed to face Song-chan directly. It turned out the two of them had managed the homestay together a decade earlier, until they were defrauded. Song-chan wanted her to come back and fight to reclaim it, but Una was exhausted. The months of fighting had cost her everything and gotten her nothing. She wanted to start over in Seoul. When he saw she had made up her mind, he stopped pushing. Not far away, Tae-soo sat by himself, replaying laying her face in his head. Seeing her again had brought all the old grief back to the surface. Yuna wandered the streets afterward and found herself crying without quite realizing it. The next morning, Tae-soo received a call from his old teacher, calling to say thank you for the wedding gift. After catching up, Tae-soo asked whether Una was doing alright these days. The teacher told him she had moved away a while back, but a month ago someone had filed a complaint demanding that her old home be demolished. To find out more, Tae-soo returned to his hometown and visited the teacher's wife. There was nothing useful beyond the filing itself. Wandering around, he ran into Heel. They walked home together. His brother grumbled the whole way about Tae-soo quitting his old job 3 years ago without explanation. Tae-soo didn't bother defending himself. He just asked how the postal work was going. Fine, Heel said. Unlike some people who couldn't hold a job. Once home, Tae-soo went about fixing things that had broken around the house. Same as always. That evening, he went to the convenience store and then swung by Yuna's old house. It was empty now, draped in cobwebs. At the store, he spotted some hand-drawn illustrations of fruit and vegetables and knew immediately they were hers. He asked the elderly woman behind the counter if Una had been in. She wouldn't say, so he left his phone number and asked her to call if Una ever came back. He mentioned that he had actually crossed paths with her recently in Seoul. The woman's expression shifted. She went to the back and returned with a stack of Christmas cards Una had painted for her over the years. He flipped them over and read the notes on the back, and without meaning to, he smiled. She had been living well, but that chapter was behind them now, and he kept reminding himself to leave it there. Wedding. Back in Seoul, he returned to his work. A new customer named Ah Sun came in to have an old photo framed. After sorting out the materials and wood finish, she also asked him to frame an oil painting for her. And since she didn't have a tape measure, she told him to measure it at home and send her the dimensions. She was curious about him. She had heard somewhere that he used to work in tech and wondered why he left. He told her that memories from the past kept breaking into his concentration. He switched to driving trains to try and outrun them. After she left, he went to dinner with his best friend. Mid-conversation, he got a call from an unknown number. Something in the caller's words changed the look on his face. He asked his friend whether 10 years was enough to forget something. His friend said 10 years was a long time. Whatever you can let go of, let it go. Live in peace. Walking home afterward, Tae-soo turned those words over and over. But peace felt like something that required more than just time. It required enough. 3 years earlier, while still working in IT, Tae-soo had been told he was being sent to India to research a new product. It was a rare and valuable opportunity. But the same day, Heel called to say their grandfather had fainted while pulling weeds. Tae-soo told him to take him to the hospital and promised to visit that weekend. Heel said everything was already arranged and told his brother to enjoy the opportunity. Then, Heel quietly mentioned something their grandmother had always wanted, to go to the beach. Hearing his little brother bring her up like that, Tae-soo realized he had been so focused on working and earning that he had stopped making time for family. He turned down the India assignment. On the way home, he booked a trip for all of them. Waiting for the train, he watched a station employee and felt something shift inside him. He thought about the job his mother had once held as a train conductor. If he did that, he could always get home in a day no matter what happened. He could be present. He had always believed that one day he would see Yuna again. And Yuna had never stopped thinking about him either. She had wondered many times, especially on the anniversary of his parents' passing, whether he was grieving. She had picked up her phone to call him on more occasions than she could count, but always stopped herself. Season after season, now she had seen him in person and he seemed to be doing well. She had decided to stop second-guessing. Then, just as that thought settled, the elderly shopkeeper sent her Tae-soo's number with a message saying he was still worried about her. Tae-soo, walking home, saw he had a missed call. He called back. Una picked up, knowing he was still outside. She said she would talk properly once he got home. He went straight there so he could hear her voice. But they had been apart so long that the conversation was all surface and small talk. He asked what her relationship with Songchan was. She said there was nothing between them and left it at that. With nothing else to say, they both hung up. Una got in trouble for sleeping in the homestay staff room, which violated the workplace policy. The manager found out and told her to move her things out immediately. With nowhere to go, she reached out to her friend, who happened to be away on a trip with her boyfriend, and was happy to let Una watch the place. That evening, Tae-soo finished his shift and spotted Una standing at the window, staring out into the night. He turned around quickly, not wanting her to see him. She caught the familiar silhouette and the bag and knew immediately it was him. Knowing he was deliberately avoiding her, she turned away too. He slipped off as quickly as he could, but as his figure disappeared around the corner, something in her gave way. She sank to the ground and cried. She had come here partly because of him, and he had just just walked away. She stayed there until the last train of the night had run. When she finally stood up and made her way to the lobby, she stopped. Tae-soo was standing there waiting for her. He walked over and said, "It had been a long time." That was all. But it was enough to bring her to tears. Right after his discharge from the military, Tae-soo had gone with his older brother to do some repair work. His brother mentioned, quietly, that Ona's father had passed away suddenly and that Ona had disappeared. Even though they hadn't been paid yet, his brother finished the repairs out of professional conscience. Tae-soo had moved through every corner of that house. He looked at photos of her smiling and felt the ache of it. Now, standing in front of her as she wept, that same ache came back without warning. They walked in the same direction. Una tried to play it off by saying she just liked to take evening walks near the station and that running into him had been a coincidence. Tae-soo knew perfectly well that wasn't true. Nobody strolls through a train station for fun. Embarrassed, she said goodnight and turned toward the building. He offered to walk her up. He said he didn't want her husband seeing them hovering in the lobby and getting the wrong idea. She immediately corrected him. She wasn't married. She was house-sitting for a friend and had only been in Seoul a few days. She asked him to stay in touch. He had just started to walk away when they both heard shouting from upstairs. The woman she had been staying with, Na-young, was in a foul mood. She had found out Una was the daughter of So-hee, who happened to be the ex of her boyfriend. Na-young accused the boyfriend of letting Una stay because he still had feelings for his ex. She then said something about Una's father, and that crossed a line. Una told her not to mention that woman's name in front of her again. That woman was the reason her father was gone. Then she grabbed her suitcase and walked out. Tae-soo had heard everything from outside. He said nothing. He just grabbed the suitcase out of her hand and started walking with a look on his face that made it clear he wasn't in the mood for an argument. She had told him she had a stable place to stay, and here she was, dragging a suitcase into the street. He told her she was coming to his place for the night, and they would figure out the rest tomorrow. She refused, so he kept walking with the suitcase, and she had no choice but to follow. At his door, Una admitted she had been seeing someone, but that it was over. She braced for a reaction. He was calm. That only confused her more. Inside, he set her up in his bed and went back to his work at the desk as if it were any other night. To soften the awkwardness, he put on a quiet piece of music. Hearing it, she recognized it immediately and confessed she had logged into his account a few days ago. In the 10 years that had passed, she had only ever done it twice. Knowing he had kept that same account, still playing the same songs, made her feel like the worst version of herself. She asked if he ever planned to sleep. He told her his shift wasn't until the next afternoon and she should get some rest. And just like that, she drifted off. He kept working through the night. Perhaps 10 years had built something between them that couldn't simply be erased. No matter how much either of them wanted to open back up, some distances take time. By the time early morning crept in, he had gone out to buy her breakfast. When he came back, she was just waking up. He worried she hadn't slept well. She told him it was actually the best sleep she'd had since arriving in Seoul. Not wanting to overstay her welcome, she said she would pick up the suitcase after work. He had already set out a portion of rice cakes and soy milk for her. As they sat together, she admitted he hadn't changed at all. She was surprised he had made such a different turn, driving trains and doing woodwork. She asked if he had thought about her during all of this time. He kept his composure. He told her he had moved on a long time ago, that on the day he left the military, he saw photos she had posted online and figured she was doing fine. She had been interning in Hawaii at the time. That distance had helped quiet the longing. But then she ran into him twice at the station, and after that, she just kept coming back. She had wanted to see him one more time, to say everything she hadn't said. That was why she kept walking around near the tracks. He didn't let any of that show. But the moment he walked her out of the station, the longing caught up with him all at once. It wore him out completely. He fell asleep and didn't wake up until noon. Then, quietly, he switched shifts with a colleague so he could be there when she returned. He went out and bought enough food to put together a proper lunch for her. When she came to pick up her bread delivery that morning, the shop owner added 2 extra pieces as a gift. She thought she would share them with Tae-soo over lunch, but she waited and he didn't come. She was about to leave when he walked up with a bottle of water. Back inside, he couldn't help himself. He asked about the ex. Were they just fighting, or were they taking a real break to work things out? Una didn't know how to answer. They hadn't seen things the same way. He launched into advice mode without meaning to, and she stopped him. Talking about it only made her feel worse, especially sitting across from him. He had always been like this, always reaching, always trying to close the gap. If she was clear about where she stood, then he would be clear too. He had a shift coming up. She could stay here while he slept over at work. He would be back home the following day, and she should make herself comfortable. Before he left, he set out a fresh fresh change of clothes for her. Something about the gesture pulled her back to the beginning, to the day she had given him a uniform. Just like that, the tenderness of it moved her deeply. She wandered around the apartment, taking in every corner. They had once made a vague promise about having a small place together in a big city. Now here were two separate spaces, close but still not quite together. With the apartment in her care, he went home to his grandparents and his brother without any lingering worry. Being fed his favorite food and surrounded by family healed something in him that the city had worn down. That night, sleeping beside Heel, his brother said that the older he got, the more afraid he was of losing them. His grandparents were the steadiest thing in his world. He knew everything ended eventually, but he told himself they would be fine. It would always be fine. Tae-soo lay there listening and felt something squeeze in his chest. He was back in Seoul for work before sunrise. His shift ended and he rushed home to see her, but she was already gone. The apartment was quiet and there was a note thanking him. He stood there feeling a mix of wistfulness and missing her. He wasn't sure how much longer it would take before things could return to what they had once been. That day he went to a client's home to take photos for a project. As the client unlocked the door, the small click of it brought a rush of memories, so specific and so tied to Una that he couldn't hold back. He cried right there. That night he ended up at his best friend's place to talk, only to find that his friend had just been dumped too. He ended up coaching the very person he had come to lean on. Meanwhile, Na-young called Una over for dinner. Her boyfriend had explained everything clearly and she had calmed down. The dinner was an apology, but Una couldn't stop thinking about how she had let Tae-soo go that night without explaining herself. Every time they were in the same space now, there was a wall between them. Late that night, she showed up at his door with her suitcase. He wasn't surprised. He already knew why. She had made a decision. She went to meet Song-chan face to face, turned down his feelings directly, and told him she was staying in Seoul to start fresh. He didn't push back, but he asked to see her one last time. When they met, he said she felt like herself again, like the person he had first known. They had only been getting to know each other for a few months, not long enough to call it a real relationship. He asked to stay in touch as someone in her corner. She thanked him sincerely for everything he had done during her father's funeral. She admitted she had felt something for him, but she hadn't wanted to become dependent on him. He respected her choice. He asked to shake her hand and said it might be the last time they saw each other. Just like that, she let go of one part of her past and stepped forward. Back at work, a coworker asked Tae-soo to make 11 picture frames as keepsakes. When the woman looked at his sample photos, she lingered on one in particular, a shot of a wooden door. It was actually the front door of Ona's old house. He had photographed it to hold on to the memory. That night, he hurried home hoping to find her. The suitcase was still there, which gave him some relief. When Yuna came back later, he was already deep asleep. Then he started calling her name in his sleep. She moved closer and took his hand to calm him. He felt her presence and held on. She tried to gently pull away. He pulled her into his arms instead and held her there. The next morning, he woke up and she was gone. He thought he had dreamed the whole thing. Then she came back through the door carrying grapes, and he just stood there staring at her, unable to look away. She told him to stop looking at her like that. She was embarrassed. He snapped back to reality, realizing none of it had been a dream. He washed his face, and when he came out, she popped a grape into his mouth for breakfast. Afterward, he walked her to the bus stop. He kept saying he wished she had woken him up so he could have spent more time with her. She told him not to worry. She was staying in Seoul from now on. They would be close. They could see each other whenever they wanted. He smiled openly at that. But when the moment actually came to let her go, he held her hand for a long time, not ready to release it. Something had shifted in her after that night. She was letting him in again. In the days that followed, Tae-soo became noticeably softer. He started saying the kinds of things people write on greeting cards, and everyone around him kept telling him they were actually quite moving. His manager complimented him and wished him much joy. He bowed quickly and made his escape. At the train station later, he heard a familiar sound, a particular rhythm of footsteps. He didn't need to look. He knew it was Una. That afternoon, they went to Namsan Tower together. She was delighted by the view and pulled out her camera immediately. When she pointed it at him, he struck every pose he could think of, fully committed. That evening, after a shower, he picked up his phone to reply to her messages. She had sent him a photo she had taken without him noticing and told him to look at it as he fell asleep. The next morning at work, the dry cleaner they usually used had closed without warning, which meant the staff now had to handle the linens themselves until a new partner was found. Yuna stopped at the bakery on the way in for a proper meal before diving into the work. After her shift, the couple met up. She was moving to a new apartment soon and invited him to the housewarming, along with another friend. He was thrilled. He immediately added it to his calendar, afraid he would forget in his store. Excited excitement, they went for a run after that. Una made it about 3 blocks before she was gasping. She spotted a beautiful view ahead and told him she was jealous that he got to see this every day. She said the fireworks from here must be incredible. He pointed out she was looking the wrong way. The fireworks were behind her. They watched the sky together for a while, then went to dinner. Their friend Seok joined them. Ona greeted him like they had known each other forever, then cheerfully ordered soju and wasted no time asking him whether Tae-soo had ever complained about her. Tae-soo refused to take the bait. He only said he was lucky to have 2 interesting women at the same table. Then a girl named Ah-sun arrived to pick something up, and Una watched her go with a flicker of recognition she couldn't quite place. After the meal, Una pulled Tae-soo out to look at Namsan at night. She pressed him about Ah-sun. He admitted they had known each other for about a year and had dated briefly for about a month. She told him her own story in return. 3 months of getting to know someone, but they had been in each other's lives for a long time before that. Tae-soo told her he wanted them to get back together. This time she said yes right away. He took her hand for the walk home and didn't let go. The next day at work, Song-chan texted her. He was clearing things out and asked if she wanted any of her belongings back. She eventually replied telling him to donate everything. He kept asking for her Seoul address. At the same time, Tae-soo texted to say he would pick her up at the nearest station when his shift ended. While he was still with a client, she texted to cancel. She had been called into an emergency meeting at the homestay. The owner had decided to close for 2 weeks. By the time the meeting wrapped up, it was late and she was drained. She texted Song-chan one more time declining to share her address and told him to put her things in storage. Then she came home to find Tae-soo waiting at her door. All the fatigue of the day disappeared the moment she stepped into his arms from behind. The next day, with 2 weeks off, she used the time to fix a broken light fixture at the homestay. She got a text from Tae-soo. He was standing outside below, but it wasn't her break time yet, so they could only wave at each other from a distance. When she clocked out, they went on a proper date. At the convenience store, he picked up an ice cream bar and used it to tap her on the shoulder in revenge for something she had done earlier. She chased after him to settle the score, then realized she hadn't paid. While she was distracted, he spun around and wrapped his arms around her. Back home that night, he worked while she helped him hang photos on the wall. In the quiet, she asked what he was planning for the future. He told her honestly that while Heel was holding things together at home, he was using this stretch of time in Seoul for himself. But eventually he would go back. He wanted to live near his family. When she heard the words going back, she went still. She asked carefully when that might be. He didn't have a specific answer yet. Then she asked if he wanted to get married someday. He said of course, and asked her the same. She admitted she didn't let herself think that far ahead. They went talking about lonelier moments, and she asked which birthday had been his loneliest. He said every year was lonely. He couldn't choose. She eventually settled on 2024 for him and painted a small wooden tag as a gift. He wanted more. She had nothing else to give, so she kissed him. They were right in the middle of a tender moment when Heel called to announce that their grandmother had agreed to see a doctor and he needed Tae-soo to come home. Tae-soo trusted Heel to handle it. He hung up and returned his full attention to Una, making up for all the time they had lost. Back at home, Heel was worried enough about his brother that he decided to come to Seoul and check on him. At the homestay that same day, Una welcomed a guest who turned out to be Sohei, her father's former partner. The moment their eyes met, Sohei went out of her way to be warm and affectionate. Una made no effort to hide her distaste. She handed over the room key and walked away without ceremony. Meanwhile, Heel arrived at the woodworking shop but didn't find Tae-soo. A client came by with a painting to be framed and was startled to find a stranger there instead. While they were talking, something happened back home. A junior postal worker delivering a letter to Yuna's old house found Tae-soo's grandmother collapsed in the kitchen. She rushed the woman to the hospital and called Heel. The news hit him so hard his legs gave out. The client caught him and helped him to the bus. When Tae-soo finished his shift and checked his phone, he saw a string of missed calls from his brother. He called the client's number and learned that his grandmother had suffered a stroke. He forced himself to stay calm enough to reassure Heel over the phone, then rearranged everything to catch the earliest possible train home. At the homestay, Sohei invited Ona to dinner just as she was wrapping up. Over the meal, she urged Ona to leave Seoul and fight to reclaim her father's homestay through the courts. Ona didn't want to hear any of it. She snapped at Sohei to stop inserting herself where she didn't belong. Then she softened, aware she had gone too far. Sohei was genuine. She said she wanted to help Ona out of the situation they were both still tangled in, but the wound was too deep. Ona couldn't pry her open that door. She got up and left. At home, she found the text from Tae-soo about his grandmother. Something about the timing made her reconsider So-hee's offer. She found herself walking quickly toward the homestay, then stopped at the entrance. She couldn't go through with it. She turned around and walked away. His grandmother made it through the crisis. Tae-soo and his grandfather allowed themselves to breathe again. He then went to take care of Heel, who had fallen and hurt his leg when the news came in. Once everything was in order, he called to thank the client who had helped his brother. When he heard she hadn't left town yet, he wanted to thank her in person, but stepping out of the room, he found his grandfather sitting alone in the hallway, staring at nothing. Tae-soo brought him water and sat with him for a moment, then asked to be excused so he could find the woman and say thank you properly. Una, back at home, kept checking her phone for a message from him, saying he was all right. But he was deep in conversation with the client. He texted Una the moment he had a chance. She exhaled. Then he tried to call, but his best friend's number appeared instead. The friend had been dumped again and was drunk and rambling. Tae-soo cut the call short. It was getting late, so he offered to drive the client back to Seoul. In the car, she mentioned she was surprised he knew her address. He smiled and reminded her of the first time they had met. She couldn't believe he still remembered. He told her to rest. He would handle the driving. Back in Seoul, Una had dozed off on the couch when So-hee called. She was about to go check on her when she heard Song-chan's voice coming from the room. Not wanting to listen to whatever he had to say, she slipped out. But the moment she stepped outside, she saw Tae-soo getting out of a car with an unfamiliar woman. He texted her shortly after, and she replied telling him not to come. When he looked up, Song-chan was standing there. Song-chan had given his whole heart to Una once. What he got in return was an empty house and her absence. The client, Ah-sun, had quietly carried feelings for Tae-soo for a long time. She had even collected the name tags he'd left behind, but the name tag he had chosen to keep was Una's. When Song-chan came out of the homestay and spotted Tae-soo, he assumed the man was there to interfere again. He called Una to ask where she was. She hesitated, but fate arranged things anyway, and the two of them ended up running into Tae-soo in an alley nearby. She grabbed his arm, pulling him away. He stopped her and told her Song-chan had already left. She relaxed. Then she started asking about the woman from the car. He explained that Ah-sun had helped heal. Nothing more. Una realized she had jumped to the wrong conclusion. She told him, with some exaggeration, that one day without him felt like a storm rolling through. So he had come to find her out of nowhere, promising to sort out the homestay situation, and that morning she had heard a man's voice from So-hee's room and had fled before she could think it through. Tae-soo laughed a little at that. He was just glad she had gotten out before running into him. But every time Song-chan appeared, something instinctive told Tae-soo the man wasn't done. Setting that aside, he went to the hospital to see his grandmother, with Heel in a wheelchair. It was just the two of them managing things together. On the way home, he tried to cook, then discovered the rice cooker had broken. He asked his grandfather what he wanted to eat, and found him already asleep on the floor. He must have been exhausted. Tae-soo tucked a blanket over him and went to the hospital to take over his grandfather's watch beside his grandmother. He was about to call Una. When the nurse announced visiting hours, he went in instead. At the homestay, Una had been given an early release because a film crew had taken over. She was heading to see Tae-soo when Song-chan texted to say the contract had been revised and needed her signature. She found it annoying but decided to go handle it once and for all. To thank Ah-sun for her help with Heel, Tae-soo agreed to have lunch with her. During the meal, she began telling him about her complicated family background, and he understood immediately what she was leading toward. He picked up his phone and called Una, then introduced her to Ah-sun as his girlfriend. Ah-sun tried one last effort, bringing up the name tag she had once given him, but when she read his face and found no opening, she let it go gracefully. That afternoon, Una texted him to say she had gone to Tongyang to check on some paperwork and would be back soon. Tae-soo said all the right things in reply, but there was a quiet unease he couldn't shake. She did meet with Song-chan as arranged. He handed her the rental contract and told her to sign it, but she grew suspicious. They had spent months unable to resolve this situation, yet So-hee had managed to fix it in almost no time at all. That's when Song-chan told her the truth. While she was in Seoul, the people who had seized the property had already let another tenant in. When they found her belongings still there, the new tenant complained and demanded a refund. So-hee had stepped in and handled the whole mess cleanly. Una immediately understood that Song-chan had told So-hee where she was living. She turned on him. He couldn't understand why she was so hostile toward someone who had worked hard on her behalf. But in Una's mind, So-hee was the reason her father was gone. She would rather lose everything connected to that woman than accept her help. Song-chan pressed her to at least go back once and see the state of the house before deciding. That felt reasonable. She followed him back. She walked through every room slowly, then left. But Song-chan called her back and told her again again that she should return for good, leave Seoul behind. Her mind was made up. She walked away. Tae-soo was unsettled on two fronts. His girlfriend had gone quiet all day without explanation, and his brother was at the hospital waiting hour by hour for their grandmother to wake up. He promised Hee-il he would be back the next day. When he got home, exhausted, he was startled to find Yuna opening the door with a smile. Every trace of fatigue left him. He pulled her into a hug. The small apartment felt full. They sat together and shared pastries and stories. She told him what she had been doing all day. It turned out, so he knew some of the people involved in the property seizure and had gotten everything resolved quietly. The paperwork that came in was what she had gone to verify. Tae-soo asked what exactly Song-chan's connection to the homestay was. She explained he had been the one who introduced her to the business opportunity. Just a partner, she said. Nothing more. The knot in Tae-soo's chest loosened. Then, quietly, he asked her whether she would let him be a part of her future. She smiled at that. Finally, she said she could be part of his. The next morning at work, Song-chan texted to say the tenant's schedule had changed, and if she was busy, she could just leave written instructions and he would handle the cleanup. Una had been about to write up the instructions and leave it to him, but something made her go herself. On the way there, she told herself this time she would take care of what needed to be done, ask Song-chan for a small amount of help, and go home quickly so Tae-soo wouldn't worry. Prior when Song-chan saw her cleaning and sorting, he assumed she had changed her mind about leaving, but she was firm. She wanted all of his things removed from the space they had once shared. This visit was not to reconcile, it was to close out the friendship entirely. They said goodbye at the bus stop. Then, after walking for a while, she turned around and went back to the homestay. Song-chan returned later and found her still there alone. He looked at the mugs and small things they had shared, every little object holding the shape of something unfinished. Tae-soo, meanwhile, was at the hospital taking turns with his grandfather. He had started researching a maritime pilot position, a job that would take him to sea, and was even talking it through with his grandmother. Maybe it was time to set an end date here and start something new. Una called a colleague to cover her shift for a few days so she could stay at the homestay to heal. She picked flowers from the garden to fill the room. When everything was in order, she said a long, quiet goodbye to the place. She told her father, somewhere above all of this, that she hoped he could see what she had built. Then she made her way back to Seoul and went straight to the train station. When Tae-soo saw her and ran to her, she was smiling the way she hadn't in a long time. She had put the past down. From now on, she could come to him whenever she wanted. The dream of being in Seoul with him had finally become real. The next morning, Song-chan realized from the empty shelves that Una had made her decision and wasn't coming back. At the homestay, Una arrived for work only to be pulled aside by a colleague with difficult news. The company that had been supporting the place was shutting down. Her supervisor had already found a new position elsewhere and was encouraging Una to do the same. The homestay, she said, wouldn't last much longer. That was a blow. Then Song-chan texted asking her to come and help close things down. The weight of it all landed on her at once. She picked up her suitcase and went back. At the hospital, Tae-soo got an update from the doctor. His grandmother's numbers weren't improving. She wasn't waking up. He took his grandfather out for a small meal that evening and told him about the maritime job. His grandfather understood right away what was underneath that plan. He told Tae-soo that everything at home could be left to Hee-il, that neither of them wanted to be the reason he stayed trapped. Tae-soo heard him, but with the goal finally in reach, he felt the pull in both directions: stay in Seoul or go back to where he was needed. Scrolling through his phone that night, he found an image Una had posted of the homestay. He searched the name online and found a photo of her and Song-chan together. He went still for 5 full seconds. Then he heard from the older brother who had passed by her old house and noticed the lights were on. He went to check and found, so he settled in there like she lived there. She didn't know about the misunderstanding between him and Una, so she talked freely, telling him about Una's life, about where she was staying. He was irritated by the rambling and almost left. But then he turned back and asked her directly about what had happened years ago. So he finally told him the truth. She hadn't been vacationing in Hawaii when Una's father fell apart. Hawaii was her hometown. She had gone back to visit family after many years. She hadn't known that Una's father would make the decision he did while she was gone. During that time, she had asked Song-chan to look after Una. The two of them had dated for a while and then separated. Tae-soo processed all of this. The ex-boyfriend and the so-called business partner Una had mentioned were the same person, and they had lived in each other's lives for over a decade. He felt something like betrayal, but he also chose to forgive her. He called and asked her to leave behind the place that held so much pain with Song-chan. The irony was that she had just arrived there with her suitcase. In the winter of 2015, Una Una had finished an internship at a five-star hotel and was saying goodbye to the front desk staff when she caught a glimpse of a passing train. Tae-soo came to mind. She told the receptionist she wasn't sure a breakup counted if it happened over the phone. The woman said no, a real ending required a face-to-face conversation. Una realized she had never actually said goodbye to him properly. She ran home to do it. Snow was coming down thick. She had no way to get back to the village until a roadside rescue vehicle happened to pass. She hitched a ride. On the way, she overheard the driver take a phone call. The voice on the other end was Tae-soo's grandmother. She was saying today was the day he left for military service. Una felt as though the ground had opened beneath her. She arrived to find only his photo. With numb, bleeding hands, she scraped the snow away until her palms were raw from the cold. There was nothing left to explain to him. Now, in the present, Tae-soo had gone to her place to talk things through in person. He was asking her to stay, but she had already gone home. She sent him a text telling him not to come, that she would call the next day and explain. He went to work, carrying that hollowness with him. He waited all day for the call. When it didn't come, he packed a bag and headed back home. Not long after he left, she arrived at his apartment looking for him. He wasn't there. Assuming he was at work, she sat down and waited through the evening. Then he called. He was at the hospital. He asked where she had been. He brought up his request again, asking her to let go of everything that was keeping her tied to the past. Instead of answering, she asked if they could meet so she could explain everything face to face. He agreed. He wanted to meet that night in Seoul, but she said she had obligations that couldn't be moved and it would be 3 days before she could see him. He hung up without another word. His grandfather came to find him just then, wanting to talk, and Una sat alone in his room, heavy with everything unsaid. Then she noticed his window was still open and went to close it. At the exact same moment, his phone rang, and it was him, asking her to close the window. She was startled that he knew she was there. They were always one step behind each other, always reaching and barely missing. He pushed her again about what she wanted to say. She held firm. No matter how many times they missed each other, she was going to say it in person. She offered to tidy the apartment. He said no. He didn't want either of them to keep wearing themselves down like this. He ended the call and stood in the hospital corridor, looking into the room where his grandfather kept watch over his grandmother. Thinking about all of it, Una returned to the countryside homestay to find the electric stove broken and the backup gas burner missing, and then the power cut out entirely. She texted Songchan saying he needed to fix everything. He read the message but couldn't bring himself to reply. Someone from his circle reached out instead, offering to come make the repairs. Tae-soo, wanting to see her, drove to the homestay area to find her. She was on her bike when the message came in. She pedaled home as fast as she could. She took him into the flower garden to talk. She explained why she had come back. The homestay was her father's legacy, and when she heard it was going to be torn down, she couldn't stand by. The thought of a bulldozer taking it apart was something she couldn't sit with. She had settled her affairs in Seoul. This was her decision. Tae-soo asked if that meant they were going long distance again. She swore she would work around his schedule and make every effort to see him more often. He accepted it because there was nothing else to do. And when he saw the light in her eyes as she looked around that garden, he didn't want to take that from her. On their way out, she remembered something and ran back into the garden. She emerged with a bouquet of flowers and placed it in his hands. She thanked him for understanding. He drove back to Seoul with her face in his mind the whole way. Before he had even pulled away from the road, he was already riding a bicycle back toward the boarding house, on the slim hope she might still be there. The dark windows told him she wasn't. He forced himself to stop and go home. She had it harder. Even in the middle of a conversation with a colleague, she couldn't stop glancing at her phone. The next morning, Tae-soo was in the middle of his woodworking when his grandfather called. The doctor had wanted to speak with him about his grandmother's condition, but his grandfather couldn't hear well enough to follow the conversation. Tae-soo dropped everything and drove home to meet with the doctor. The news was not good. Her vital signs were declining. She hadn't been able to be roused. He asked the doctor question after question until Heel stepped in and told him to breathe. Looking at the people he loved most, consumed by fear, Tae-soo felt the weight settle across his shoulders again. The three of them went home to rest and cook. His grandfather said he had always depended on her for meals and was just now realizing what a skill it really was. He told Tae-soo to learn to cook properly someday, so that if his wife was ever unwell, he could make her something decent. After eating, Tae-soo went looking for Heel and couldn't find him in the house. He biked down toward the river and found his brother wading through the shallows. He ran down to pull him out. Heel resisted, convinced Tae-soo was trying to steal his fish. Then Heel got quiet. He said the whole world felt dark right now. He wondered if this was what it felt like to lose hope. He mentioned something their grandmother had once told him. When their their mother was in the ICU. Tae-soo had stayed alone in that waiting room for 2 days. He was even smaller than Hee-il was now. He must have been exhausted and frightened in a way he could barely understand. But Hee-il believed their grandmother would wake up for Tae-soo. She would come back because of him. Sitting in the car listening to his brother say all of this, Tae-soo could only wipe his face with the back of his hand. Across town, Una was sitting around a fire with a colleague swapping stories when Song-chan arrived. After checking over the repairs around the house, he cracked open a beer. She asked if he was planning to stay. He told her he had a work trip to Jeju coming up and had come to say goodbye. He reminded her to call him if she ever needed anything. She appreciated it. She gave him a bottle of wine she had found in the cabinet, one he had often mentioned. That's when he told her the story behind it. Her father had given him that bottle when he decided to quit drinking and threw everything out. Song-chan had been holding it for a special occasion to share with someone. He handed it back and told her to save it for a celebration. She looked at the bottle and thought of her father and felt her chest tighten. Song-chan, sensing the mood, suggested they drink together. They did, and over the drinks, they thanked each other for the years they had spent looking out for one another. He admitted his feelings had always been real, but the way she spoke to him had always kept a clear line between them. They drank to what had been and wished each other well. Before leaving, he told her to stay away from trouble, and if any rough types came around, she should call the police or reach out to the contact he had set up. She nodded. Only then did he feel ready to go. Tae-soo pulled himself together and drove out to find her. But when he arrived, he saw a pair of men's shoes outside the door and a small folding table with drinks. His mind filled in the rest. He backed away to the car. He called her. No answer. She had fallen asleep after Song-chan helped her into bed. The ringing stirred her, but by the time she found her phone, the call had ended. Then Song-chan came out through the door. Tae-soo saw him from the car. Song-chan spotted Tae-soo and walked over, knocking on the window and demanding he get out. The noise woke Una, and she ran outside. She took in the scene in an instant and knew exactly what kind of trouble this was. Tae-soo moved to get out of the car. She shook her head at him. That small gesture hit him like a verdict. He started the engine and drove away. The moment the car disappeared, she collapsed on the ground in tears. Song-chan, disappointed in her, left as well. The next morning, she took the bus to Seoul to find Tae-soo. He had also texted saying he wanted to see her, but when she got to the stop, he wasn't there. He had rushed to the hospital. His grandmother wasn't responding to medication anymore. Her condition was worsening. Looking at her lying there with tubes and machines, the image of his mother's final days came back with full force, and the ringing started in his left ear. He went home to find his grandfather standing outside the door, waiting, scanning his face. When his grandfather saw the way Tae-soo hesitated to speak, he understood. He broke down. Tae-soo sat alone in his room and couldn't think his way through any of it. He went down to the river. Still nothing. Una was still at the meeting point, waiting. She called him. No answer. She typed out explanations, then erased them, afraid he wouldn't believe her. She sat by the bridge and cried. After some time in the water to clear his head, Tae-soo went inside and sat down in the kitchen. He looked at the rice cooker and thought about his grandmother, still sleeping in that hospital bed. He opened his phone. He saw her missed calls and called back. She picked up immediately and started to explain, but he stopped her. He said he was too tired, that everything had become more than he could carry, that the place she was in was right for her, and the place he was in was right for him. He said he wanted to let it all go. Una couldn't absorb the blow of that. She managed only a quiet apology before the line went dead. It looks like another unofficial breakup is unfolding between Tae-ju and Una. Weighed down by the pressures of life and the painful regret of their split, Tae-ju cries his eyes out. His grandfather completely understands what he is going through and quietly waits for him to finish before calling him inside. The next day, the local grocery store owner visits Tae-ju's grandmother to lift her spirits. She sings an old childhood song, proving that at their age, sometimes all you need is a little emotional medicine. Meanwhile, Tae-ju heads back to the city for work. Later that day, he returns a gift order to a coworker, carefully attaching photos to the packages so they do not get mixed up. One of them is a picture of a sunset that Una loved. Seeing it makes him zone out, completely lost in thought. In the end, he asks to keep that specific photo as a memory. Just as he sees his coworker off, Ah-sun stops by to pick up her photos, spotting his study materials and a few cans of beer. She quickly guesses that he is juggling 5 things at once, between his main job, a side gig, hunting for a new career, family issues, and relationship drama, it is no wonder his head is spinning. But for Taiju, this is just a normal part of life. Knowing he is heartbroken, Ah-sun tries to comfort him, saying that first loves are rarely perfect, and the next one will definitely be better. Right then, his phone rings. It is Huisung calling to say that their grandmother's lips just moved. He wants Taiju to come right away and wait for her to wake up. Hearing this, Ah-sun insists on tagging along and even offers to drive him. On the road, she gets curious and asks about his past breakups. Exhausted and heartbroken, he vaguely mutters that it happened twice with the exact same person before drifting off into a deep sleep. That night, Huisung heads down to the stream, catching a firefly in the dark. He holds it close and makes a wish. Soon after, the doctor calls with incredible news. His grandmother is awake. Overjoyed, he immediately calls Taiju and rushes his grandfather to the hospital. Taiju and Ah-sun are the first to arrive. Finding the room crowded with doctors, Taiju braces himself, fearing this might just be a final moment of clarity before she passes. But then, Ah-sun points out that her hand is moving. Stunned, he walks over to her side. A moment later, his grandfather and Huisung rush in to witness the miracle. Seeing the older woman wake up makes Ah-sun think of her own father, prompting her to step out and check on his hospital visit. Once things settle down, Taiju drives Ah-sun home. He pulls over by the road to silently share the good news with his late parents, grateful that a miracle finally found their family. At the same time, Una is still keeping tabs on his life. Hearing that his grandmother woke up, she's genuinely happy for him. He finally has a place to return to, and his life can get back on track. Even though his daily routine of crossing the Dongjak Bridge and hanging out with friends after work seems incredibly ordinary, Una knows exactly how precious that peace is to him. The following morning, Taiju drops off some wood at Ah-sun's office. Since this is the last time they will see each other, he wants to keep things strictly professional and offers to treat her and say okay to a meal as a thank you. But Ah-sun turns him down. If he really wants to thank her, she asks for a rather strange favor. She wants them to officially break up. It is not that they were ever actually dating, but she has never experienced a breakup before and wants to know what it feels like. Taiju is completely speechless. She tells him to just pretend the table delivery was a date and casually admits she used to have feelings for him. Seeing how earnest she is, he reluctantly agrees. Ah-sun actually has her own hidden struggles. She wanted her first breakup to be warm and gentle, hoping it would make future goodbyes with loved ones a little less terrifying. On his way back, Taiju gets a text from her with the time and place for their fake breakup. Seeing the location makes him wonder where Una was when she ended things with him. Was she by the river or sitting in a corner of her kitchen just like he was? That night, he hits his usual spot and gets blackout drunk. The owner and his best friend tell him to let it all out. Taking a shot to numb the pain, he tells them about the fateful night he saw Song-chan walking out of Ona's house. He wanted to march right up and confront them, but Ona just shook her head to stop him. Thinking about it now makes the memory even more bitter. His friend does not know what to say and simply keeps pouring the drinks, even completely wasted. Taiju cannot stop thinking about her. He remembers when they used to watch the sunset together. It is the exact same sun, but now they are worlds apart. During this time, Una pours all her energy into running the guest house. Her life looks peaceful on the outside, but she cannot hide the lingering loneliness and pain from the breakup. Out of nowhere, she gets a text from So-hee. Rushing outside, she finds her aunt casually chatting with the neighbors right by the front door. This time around, Una drops her bitter attitude. She welcomes So-hee to stay as long as she wants, and even makes her lunch. When So-hee takes a sip of the corn tea, she is caught off guard. It tastes exactly like the tea Una's father used to make. She even asks to take some back home. Hearing her dad mentioned brings Una's mood down. So-hee then opens up, explaining she never actually wanted to go to Gangnam back in the day, but by pure chance, she met Una and her father there. At the time, he was selling vegetables and making vegan dishes. She ended up calling his company every single day just to check the menu. That daily routine left a deep impression on her and ultimately convinced her to stay. She admits it was the best decision she ever made. Before wrapping up the conversation, she casually drops the news that she is getting married and will not be returning to Korea. Walking back that evening, So-hee reminds Una to pack the tea along with 2 sets of bowls as a gift for her mother. Una agrees, asking if she needs anything else. When So-hee asks for her dad's old wooden nameplate, Una firmly refuses, as it is the only keepsake she has left of him. Later that night, So-hee visits Una in her room and asks her to move to Hawaii with her. Una stays completely silent. The next morning, she prepares the corn tea as promised and walks So-hee to the bus station. Before getting on the bus, So-hee wants to take a picture of Una to show her mom back home, saying how much the older woman misses her. her. After going over some final advice, so he reaches out for one last hug. Right then, Una changes her mind. She tells her aunt she wants to go to Hawaii. Hearing this, so he bursts into happy tears. She has been waiting to hear those words for a long time and even has a room fully prepped for her. But Una is not leaving just yet. She wants to tie up all her loose ends back home first. Returning to the homestay, she posts an official notice that she is closing down. She even starts giving away the furniture to her guests. That afternoon, after seeing off her very last visitor, Una takes a bike ride through the reed field, taking one final look at the beautiful scenery filled with their memories. Finally, she rolls her suitcase away, bringing her father's nameplate with her. Back in the city, Taeju is sitting through an interview to become a train driver. When the recruiter asks why he left his previous job, Taeju glances out the window at Namsan Tower. His mind instantly drifts to Una, causing him to lose his focus and bomb the question. Returning to the station later, his co-workers hand him some farewell photos. One of them is a candid shot of him and Una meeting at the subway. A flood of old memories hits him all at once. He finally understands that his place is in his hometown, while Una belongs in Tongyo. Neither of them did anything wrong. Yet after running in circles, they are being forced apart once again. Refusing to accept this ending, he drives all the way to Tongyo to find her, only to discover an empty house. Asking the neighbors, he learns she closed the homestay and moved back to her mother's place. Hearing this, Taeju suddenly remembers she had brought this up to him before. Returning to Seoul, Ah-sun tracks Taeju down, wanting to carry out their planned breakup right away. Playing along, he takes her hand and warmly thanks her for all her care and help lately. Ah-sun holds his hand tightly and finally confesses the secret crush she has hidden for years. It turns out she has liked him since middle school, but his life was so incredibly tough back then that she never had the courage to tell him breakswing. She honestly thought bad luck would follow him forever, but watching him carve out his own path, find true love, and refuse to let the hardships defeat him, she realized her prejudice was completely wrong. She also thanks him for letting her witness a real miracle when his grandmother woke up. Hearing her confession, Taeju realizes they are both just incredibly stubborn when it comes to love. Feeling overwhelmed, he pulls his hand away and stands up to catch his breath. Gathering every ounce of courage she has, Ah-sun asks if they can start a real relationship, promising they will officially break up on Christmas. Not wanting to crush her sincere feelings and desperately needing a way to move on from Una, he finally agrees. That evening, Taeju packs all of Una's belongings into a box, quietly resolving to let go of their unfinished romance. Afterward, he heads to the hospital to take over his grandfather's shift. On the way home, his grandfather asks how the job interview went. Taeju admits he failed and plans to try again next year. It is the very first time the old man has ever seen his grandson fail a test, and he is visibly shocked. Needing to clear his head, Taeju takes a walk around the village. Suddenly, he spots Una sitting by the road. She came all the way back just to say a proper goodbye before leaving the country. But before she can even speak, Seoke and Ah-sun walk up, calling Taeju in for dinner. Not wanting to complicate his life, Una quickly hops on her bike and rides away. During dinner, Ah-sun notices Taeju spacing out and easily guesses he is thinking about Una. Walking him home later, she tells him to go find her, pointing out that Una probably had something important to say in person. Back in his room, Taeju cannot hold back anymore and texts her, asking why she came to Yeoju. The following morning, he visits his grandmother at the hospital. Even though she is awake, her memory is stuck in the past, right around the time he came home on military leave. After chatting with her, he asks Huisung if he knows where Yuna is staying. Huisung does not want to see him get crushed again and tells him to just let the past go, live a normal life, get married, and have kids. But for someone who loves as deeply as Taeju, letting go is never that simple. Walking home, the grocery store owner flags him down. She tells him Una is back in town, riding an old bike around, and urges him to go find her. At that very moment, Una is wandering around their old school, a place packed with their happiest memories. The familiar sights overwhelm her, bringing her to tears. By nightfall, Taeju finally tracks her down at the school. She tells him she only came to say goodbye, and now that she has seen him, she is ready to go. For a brief moment, it feels like they are high schoolers again, as they ride their bikes side by side in the dark. But when they reach the crossroads, they both stop. Neither of them has the courage to ask the other to stay. Without a word, they turn their backs and ride off in opposite directions. Back in his room that night, Taeju cannot help but call her. He tells her he went looking for her in Tongyo. On the other end of the line, Una chokes back tears, saying all his worrying was for nothing now. Hearing that completely shatters him. He realizes he was the only one desperately trying to hold on to the relationship. Una softly says that the one thing thing they are truly best at is missing each other. It was true 10 years ago, and it is still true now. Right in the middle of the call, Ah-sun unexpectedly shows up at his door, not wanting to cause any trouble. Una quietly hangs up the phone. Not long after, Hee-in calls Una, asking her to come up to Seoul and look after her homestay. The next day, Una makes the trip and helps her older friend check in the guests. Grateful for the help, Hee-in asks if she came all the way to the city just to meet someone else. Una replies that she already saw the person she needed to see, though only for a brief moment. Later that afternoon, she walks past Namsan Tower, remembering a promise she made to Taeju. She makes a sudden choice. She texts her aunt to delay the Hawaii trip and pedals straight toward his house to see him. But just as she arrives, she sees Ah-sun stepping out of a car and effortlessly punching in the passcode to his front door. In that crushing moment, Ina realizes he is truly moving on, and she has no reason to be there anymore. She quietly turns around, telling herself this is where their story officially ends. Heavy-hearted, she boards the bus back to Tongyo. Sitting there, she finally understands her father's old advice. He always told her to treat life like a vacation and just enjoy the ride. But every vacation has an end date, and no matter how much you want to stay, eventually, you have to pack up and go home. When Taeju finishes work, he sees a missed call from Una. Without wasting a second, he rushes straight to her old, abandoned house in the village, a place holding countless precious memories. Una is there. She tells him she is leaving for Hawaii on Friday, admitting that she finally accepted Sohee as a mother figure, partly because of him. Taeju asks if she has everything sorted out for the move. She assures him she will be living with her grandmother and Sohee, and she already has a hotel job lined up. Hearing that she is settled brings him some peace of mind. He just does not understand how they ended up like this, feeling like everything went wrong from the very start. But Yuna disagrees. She thinks he has every right to move on. After all, when she was 20, she made a terrible choice that derailed his life. She then confesses that she logged into his account twice from this very house. The first time was in December, when she accepted their breakup and decided to take the Hawaii internship. The second time was when she gave up everything in Tongyeong and moved back home. She tells him that logging in made her feel like she was watching over him, using his presence as her emotional support whenever she needed strength. Taeju just looks at her, hoping that once she leaves, she will always smile as brightly as she did in those photos. The weight of their unfinished love finally breaks them, and they both burst into tears. They clearly cannot let each other go, but their uncertain futures stand between them like a massive wall. For now, a temporary goodbye seems like the only choice they have. Around this time, Song-chan officially quits his job at the hotel. Knowing the girl he likes is leaving for Hawaii, he calls to say his goodbyes. At first, he was furious when she gave up the homestay, thinking she did it because of Taeju, after all the hard work he poured into it. But once he cooled down, he realized he had absolutely no right to be mad. Plus, knowing she will be with that, so he puts his mind at ease. Still, with her gone, the hotel feels incredibly empty. Without her around, his own future suddenly looks blurry. He thought about just drifting through life, but because of her, he has been pushing himself to be better. Even so, he knows 10 years of chasing after her is enough. He genuinely wishes her a wonderful life. Meanwhile, Ah-sun accidentally spots a slightly open drawer in Taeju's house. Inside, she finds photos of him and Una, along with a pile of keepsakes. She tries to tell herself it does not matter, but the tears start falling anyway. She finally accepts that Una is completely irreplaceable in his heart. Leaving the house in a daze, she ends up stuck in a massive traffic jam. The frustration boils over, and she starts banging on car windows, begging people to move. Taeju happens to be walking by and sees her having a meltdown. As she tries to explain the traffic, her phone rings with terrifying news. Her dad is in critical condition. Panicking, she somehow manages to stay strong enough to calm her mother down over the phone. After rushing to the hospital and handling the situation, she comes back home to find Taeju waiting outside for her. She tells him her dad survived the crisis, but things are not looking great. She then hands him a photo of her father, asking him to build a frame for it. As he turns to leave, Ah-sun finally brings up Una. She explains how Una came to the house, saw her put in the door code, and completely misunderstood the situation. She wanted to chase after her and explain, but Una was already gone. Looking at him, Ah-sun admits she is finally ready to accept his breakup. Taeju takes her for a quiet walk and tells her why he is so grateful to her. Because of her, he learned what a warm, caring goodbye actually feels like. After parting ways, Taeju stays up all night crafting the picture frame. Ah-sun needed it done quickly, so he combines 3 days of work into one. He carefully wraps the edges in traditional hanji paper and builds a solid wooden base, designing it so her father would feel like he was receiving a warm, comforting hug. When it is finished, he has his friend deliver it to to her, and just like that, their paths permanently go their separate ways. Later that day, Taeju's grandmother is finally discharged from the hospital. The whole family is waiting at home to celebrate, but the only person she really wants to see is Una. So, they all pack up and head to Una's house. The moment she sees the young woman, she grabs her hands and frantically asks if she is hurt. It turns out her memory is still stuck on the day Una dug through the snow looking for Taeju. The old woman knows Una must be hurting, but gently tells her it is time to let the past go. Hearing about her trip, she wishes her a safe and peaceful journey, promising that she and her husband will visit Una's father's grave so he never feels lonely. Her warm words leave Una deeply moved. That evening, Taeju drags himself home, completely exhausted. Just then, his phone rings. It is his grandmother, and this time, her memory is completely back to normal. Thrilled, Huisung sprints out to get Una to come over. When she arrives, she finds the grandmother chatting away with Taeju on the phone. Hearing Una's soft voice through the speaker, every ounce of Taeju's exhaustion instantly melts away. The next day is moving day. Before leaving, Una gifts the grocery store owner a beautiful bouquet and snaps a photo with her to remember the moment. Taeju also shows up to see her off at the airport. Sitting across from her on the train ride there, he types out a heartfelt message. He hopes that in Hawaii, she will be deeply loved, truly valued, and live a life full of peace and happiness. He adds that if she ever wants to write him back into her life plan, all she has to do is say the D word. When they finally reach the terminal, they share one last embrace, choking back tears. Taeju tells her he still loves her. Just like 10 years ago, nothing has changed. Feeling the warmth of his hug, Una cries quietly, holding on to the hope that this goodbye is not an ending, but the start of something brand new. 1 year passes. Taeju receives a batch of photos from Una in Hawaii. In the pictures, she looks gentle, happy, and completely at peace. Her life seems stable and full of light. As for him, he still quietly takes care of her old empty house. He hangs her wooden nameplate right by the front door, silently waiting for the day she finally comes back home. And that wraps up our story for today. Thanks for watching, everyone.